Okay, so before I hand it over to Asit, I would request Yusuf to please share a few words with our members. Thank you.
Hi, welcome everybody. I won't take much time, but I think this session is going to be really interesting. I know Asit for some time, and he's a legendary in this cybersecurity area. I'm sure you will enjoy the session, and nothing more. I think this session will tell you the kind of interest that you will generate in this session, right? So thank you, Asit, and all the very best.
Thank you. I have the rights to present now.
Yes, Asit, you'll be able to present now.
And thanks for taking on the time to join the session today. As Sushma introduced me, my name is Asit Verma. We'll try to keep this session a little different and a light. More importantly, try have some interactions towards the end to clarify any doubts or any questions that you may have. And then, of course, you can reach out to me later after the session as well. So let's start with this today. And vulnerability management, as we all know, is a very important area in the risk reduction or maturity of an organization towards cybersecurity, right? We all have come across this in some or other way, either as a solution designer towards this, or even as a technical expert or a participant in the areas, or in various different roles that we follow. So we're going to look at today some of the areas on how vulnerability management is important, why is it important, and how we can make it an effective mechanism towards reduction of risk. So let's start with what vulnerability management is all about, right? The vulnerability management cycle, this is referenced from Gartner, is the whole cycle to assess, prioritize the risks, act on them, reassess them after you've acted on those risks to mitigate those identified vulnerabilities, or either accept them if you can't remediate them, and then reassess whether you stand or where your organization stands on those areas, and then take that to an improvement cycle. Probably all of us have seen this, but the reality lies in that vulnerability management is not done as per this cycle in most organizations, right? So what people actually need to look at is then what is vulnerability management. Most of the time, when vulnerability management is talked about, three words come to the picture, right? VA, which is vulnerability assessment, PT, which is penetration testing, or remediation, right? And most of these are done independently by three different teams or organizations or sections within the organization, some internally, some externally, right? But vulnerability management is a process of identifying, most importantly, identifying, then evaluating, treating, and then reporting on the security vulnerabilities. And what are security vulnerabilities? Security vulnerabilities, typically, the way we look at it is the vulnerabilities in our servers, OS, or network. And we forget the applications, databases, and other IT areas, right? So the vulnerabilities are all those technological weaknesses that allow any attackers to come in through any channel which is connected to the outside world. So an assessment should, as we saw in the diagram, should be a continuous process or a plan that defines what is a vulnerability across the network, and the keyword there is across the network, right? Which will help, the whole process should help us identify the vulnerabilities, evaluate them, treat them, and report them effectively on an ongoing basis. So exploit these. This is the lighter side of the facts. I think I'll give a moment for you to go through some of these screens, and we must have seen all of these come around in our experience. Right? Secrets management, how do we do secrets? What is critical vulnerabilities? Where do I store the secrets? Data breaches, like the guy is here but he's looking to be logged in from somewhere else. And this last one is very, very interesting, right? I mean, mostly it is about, okay, how many vulnerabilities did we find? Well, I found 3 of them, as in the cartoon quip over here. So, and we get on to remediate them. But the bigger question here, or the joke, is that how many did you not find? And that's the one which should be worrying you. We'll take a pause here and kind of take a poll at the very beginning to understand what's your understanding on vulnerability patching. So if we can run the poll now, please.
I hope you all have the poll now. I see people have started submitting their option. We'll take 10 more seconds and then we'll publish the result to all. I'll just read out the poll for you. What is the typical cycle of patching for non-critical vulnerabilities that should be followed as per industry best practices? You have 4 options, whether it is as per availability of IT team, as what my competitor is doing, less than 90 days, less than 30 days, and I don't know. Okay, I'll just publish the result now. Thank you so much for participating.
So as I suspected, a lot of people have said 90 days, right? And or less than 90 days actually. And there are a few 1% which are saying as my competitor or what, I don't know. But most importantly, very few people are looking at it in other options, right? So let's Sushma, if I can go back to the screen.
Absolutely. You should have it now.
Yeah. So let's look at it, what the industry is saying about the trends today. If you look at on the right side of this screen, mostly whether it be education, government, health and wellness, NGOs, manufacturing, travel, most of them are lying 90 or greater than days. So your answer, if you said less than 90 days, is actually better than what these organizations are saying, but the ideal answer is less than 30 days. Okay. And why? Most important thing, one of the keywords there was non-critical vulnerabilities, because the critical vulnerabilities need to be patched immediately. These were non-critical, which again need to be patched in less than a month's cycle. And the organization's security risk rating depends on how you manage these vulnerabilities. So if you look on the left side, most targeted sectors by some of the phishing attacks, this is over the last year during the COVID times, is 19% in financial institutions, payments, telecoms, e-commerce, cloud storage is being targeted, social media, right? And we've seen some of these trends come around during the COVID time. So when you take a vulnerability management as a program to one of your customers or even internally, some of the challenges or the points that people or the target, the owners of the assets work are, do we really need help from outside? How does it affect our systems? What is the worst case scenario that will happen? I mean, if I don't patch or don't manage the vulnerabilities, how dangerous is the issue? Nobody's told me how dangerous is the issue. They're talking about there are a lot of vulnerabilities, but nothing has happened to my organization until now. So why do I need to, go through this extra work of patching and retesting and all that? So these are some of the questions that customers face and they are always in a dilemma whether to apply these fixes or not. And I'm sure most of us have come across these and battle when we propose a vulnerability management solution. So for a moment, let's talk about what is breach and attack simulation. So definition of a breach and attack simulation is, to be able to use a method which, helps kind of provide a simulation method to test out how the attackers can, come in various ways, whether these simulations can be done in an automated or a manual way, but these are must, right? And some use cases for these are to simulate sophisticated attacks. That helps in production environments, without having intrusive effect, and taking them on a side and kind of testing out various vulnerabilities, how they would attack our environments. The intelligence that we get through this also helps us in remediate things faster. It provides valuable information to prioritize our investments in terms of either tools, technologies, processes, or even the manpower that we are throwing towards these. And as I said in the beginning of the session, there are various kinds of breach and attack simulation methods. One of them is penetration testing. They can be white box, gray box, black box kind of things. There are red teams, blue teams that can help run simulation exercises towards internal or external teams. And they use more resources than a pen test, but the goal is to fully understand the level of risk and vulnerabilities existing in an infrastructure. And then there's the vulnerability assessment process that consists of identifying, quantifying, and prioritizing the vulnerabilities in an environment. Apologies for the text running through, but we'll fix this when we have the PPT. Now, even when we go through managing the vulnerabilities in a system, there are primarily two teams, the security team and the IT operations team. Security team's main task is to find the vulnerabilities. And then in the end, on the point 5, as you notice on the right, is report on the progress. But the IT operations team, which are the asset owners, whether it be server owners, network owners, application owners, those guys are the ones who receive these vulnerabilities in sort of either tickets or emails or however be the process of your organization. And they try to then find out typically that, oh, I've got hundreds of vulnerabilities or thousands of vulnerabilities to remediate across all this large estate. So let me decide what to fix first. This usually is dependent on the time that is the IT operations team has, because they're doing other things in terms of managing, monitoring, supporting their IT systems. And they make those changes usually manually and as per their availability. So this leads to further problems. And what are those problems? It's they waste more time in confirming whether the data is current, what should we do. They don't know what's important to fix. It takes sometimes days and weeks, and that's where those 90 days comes in, to fix those vulnerabilities. So completely manual in most cases, and again, not a reliable way to see, okay, which assets have been fixed for those vulnerabilities and what's left out. So the reporting is inconclusive. And that leads to some of these greater implications, which is inability to fix vulnerabilities fast enough. It still results in data breaches. So you've thrown money, you've thrown effort, you've thrown various methods on it. You've bugged your IT teams, you've made foes within your organization, and still there are data breaches happening. And then in the end, you end up losing people due to this soul-crushing work, which happens. So these are the typical problems any IT security guy is facing today, with solving these vulnerabilities. So what do we do about them? So let's look at a 4-point view, which is based on various industry norms, expertise from various areas or product companies which manage vulnerabilities, and our own view towards how to have an effective vulnerability management. So first point is about manage your vulnerabilities, right? I mean, the attacks, exploits, already known vulnerabilities. Look at what is there, what is not there. Understand the risks posture. Leverage the various technologies, and there are some free that are available. There are paid ones. There are solutions for cloud, on-prem environments, hybrid environments. So you should ideally look at what lies. One shirt doesn't fit all kind of a method. So this is and what kind of vulnerabilities we want. Second is making policies without enforcement is not going to help. Policies must be there. It has to be driven top down. They must have effective technical controls along with that. So let me take an example here is that there may be a great vulnerability management policy which states that every month vulnerabilities should be remediated, but it doesn't go further in deep that what kind of vulnerabilities, who will do, who is the owner, who's the custodian, who's the contributor, and so on and so forth, right? So policies and the controls should include vulnerability assessment, remediation, data security, endpoint security, everything. Most importantly, the third point is about protecting the data. At the end of the day, we are removing these vulnerabilities to protect data, which is the most important, right? So enforce which devices are authorized, track what information is being moved on or off these devices. Consumerization of IT, also actually be able to use these devices on business machines. Work from home adds on to this. And then how you're going to protect the organizational data when people are working from home. So focus on the data and not the endpoint protection. And then lastly, we must have a multi-layered approach to security with the threat landscape that is constantly evolving. And as you would have seen, the hackers are now using AI-based attacks rather than manual attacks to target these vulnerabilities. We have to be more aware and one step ahead of them. We must adopt a multi-layered approach. So just a vulnerability management or patching or finding, doing a VAs or scans over a period of time is not going to help us. We have to stay ahead of the threat curve, maintain the 360-degree protection against the increasing vulnerabilities. We must learn from what is happening in either our size of similar other organizations of our size, similar other verticals, what in the same vertical, what are the other customers doing or other companies doing. And most importantly, even the product suites, which actually help us protect and analyze these vulnerabilities and how we should. So vulnerability management, where does it lie in a managed detection and response cycle, right? I mean, if you look at this diagram here, which I tried to project in a very simple form, IT assets on the left side, send in data. We have a SOC or an SIEM system, which is monitoring this, doing the security incident and event management, right? And this is there in some or other form in most organizations. Better organizations who are more mature have added external threat intelligence feeds through NVD or other threat intelligence sources into the SOC for bringing in an outside-in view or an external contextualization of the threats. And that's how they do a better correlation of the threats that are in their systems. And then, of course, there are cyber threat intelligence teams or the SOC operations teams that look at these anomalies that are raised as alerts and manually identified attacks, create those tickets for certain actions which are taken by the IT teams. The SOAR functionality also brings in the automation where certain, if the attack signature is a known and has a better fingerprint or a known fingerprint outside based on the threat intel feeds, then that can be auto-remediated or a ticket or action can be created for that automatically. So where is vulnerability management in this? Nowhere. Right? It's sitting in a corner somewhere, right? Typically, if you notice that this will be sitting in a corner, there is a separate team which does VA, PT, and then create tickets and send off, over here for somebody to remediate. Not my problem. I've done my VA scans in every month, and I've sent them off for somebody to remediate. Is that the ideal scenario? No. So what we should do? What we should do is we should tie that in from a remediation is based on asset risk factors. We should contextualize how those risks are related to my business or the kind of assets. And those, if we add to the external threat intelligence or vulnerability intelligence in this case, it helps, in certain areas. One example is that you could feed in those scans and figure out what kind of assets are having vulnerabilities. If you feed in all your IT estate in there, you could figure out proactively what kind of vulnerabilities are known vulnerabilities are there. And so your remediation cycle and even the downtime cycle of your assets can be reduced significantly. Right. Lastly, if the results of the vulnerability management are fed into the SIM, that also helps proactively reduce the alerts or the risks that the SOAR function or even the teams that the threat intelligence analysts are doing. So vulnerability management should not be sitting in an isolation. It should become a part of the MDR cycle, should feed in, and only then you'll have a 360-degree effectiveness of the program. Let's take a pause and another poll. The poll this time is going to be about vulnerability identification and prioritization. How should we prioritize? So, Sushma.
Sure. Thank you. Thanks, Asit. So members, I guess you should have it on the screen now. It is vulnerabilities should be identified and prioritized as per which of the following. And the options are as per rating given by scanning, as per NIST standard, combination of tool rating, as per IT team score, or you don't know. So just take 10 more seconds to respond, and then we'll publish the results. 5 seconds more.
And give them a bit on this time.
You should have the
okay. So 10 slides later, everyone is an expert. Okay. So we should use a combination of tool ratings, business context of assets, and CVSS scores. Great. So if we are doing that, and we should all be good. NIST standards are not correct because obviously they will be tying only to various functions of those individually. So that is why it's a combination that we need to use for prioritizing and identification of the vulnerabilities. And let's look at more on this area a little bit. That what is the vulnerability management end-to-end framework? We saw this in the Gartner framework in the beginning and as full circle. But I'll explain that in a little more detail in the next slide. But let's look at in the overall vulnerability management. When you go and say to your customers or even to your IT head or security head in your organizations, or if you are the security head, you should look at that how my team is doing this. So are they doing the discovery? It's a 6-step process which has to be done entirely. And missing out any one of these is you're not managing the vulnerability end-to-end. You must have a discovery of assets. You must prioritize those assets. You must assess the various levels of whether you do a VA, PT, application security testing, or network security testing, white box, gray box, whatever, various methods depending on your needs. There are compliance assessments, whether it be PCI or others, right? What is it that you're reporting? And how are you remediating in this? And then post-remediation, are you even verifying this, right? So let's look at what it covers, each one of these. Discovery is very, very important because it helps us identify existing assets and the new ones that may have come up since the last time we did a scan on the. So do you have a discovery system which continuously goes and discovers the new assets that come around on this environment? Do you prioritize those assets? Do you discover and categorize those assets according to the criticality of the business? Why is this important? This is very, very important because the asset criticality and the priority of the vulnerability is going to make a score of what should be remediated first. What are the kinds of assessments that we're doing? Threat threat detection, intrusion detection, pen tests, website, SQL, proscripts, password hacking, URL fuzzing, various different mechanisms are there. Whether we are doing it for a compliance reason, whether we're doing vulnerability scanning across the network, we are always need to make sure that the assessment is as per the business requirements and staying ahead of the threat curve of the organization. Now, reporting is equally important. If we do not report, and report here is not just the end result of the report. Report is providing the actionable intelligence to our IT teams. That detailed reports should cover that. At the end of the day, today, we have to look at what is real-time insight into the. So the reports must say, what is the aging of the vulnerabilities? How many vulnerabilities are there? Whether they were there in the same systems last time, then this is scan, right? So reports have to be contextualized. Those reports cannot be the output of a VA or a PT scan. These have to be a live dashboard, which has to be looked at constantly. Remediation, right? Security infrastructure implementation, security remediation, incident response, as I said earlier in the previous slides, they have to tie in together. So remediation is not just raising the vulnerabilities, creating those tickets and sending them off to someone. They have to be also integrated with your other security systems so that they are remediated. For example, somebody is doing a network, firewall policy scans, right? And they are looking at how many policies are old and maybe not used, right? So they also need to have a contextualized report to remediate them better. And then most importantly, we got to go back and verify that whether the analysis which you did earlier now has been gone away. It's like the ATBX cycle which we have run, entry, task, verification, and exit. Before you exit out of that cycle, you must do the verification. And that is what creates the 360-degree for an effective end-to-end vulnerability management framework. Now, that was all great talk, right? Probably. But how do we do this? What should we bring it in, right? So this is the typical picture of how vulnerability management is done today. Vulnerability creates some scans, assess, fix state, and then coordinate the changes get them approved through the CAB, and raise them on to IT. Okay, I've given them contextualized information also, but that's only as per the person or the team who is. It will depend on the intelligence of the team who is working on those. How do we make it more effective? Is by automating some of those scans, by contextualizing them with the NVD database or adding the external intelligence into it. What are the common vulnerabilities, exposures, cyber threat feeds, right? The triaging rules, risk calculators have to be picked up from some from here, some from the business, contextualization that you had done earlier for your assets, and the discovery of items. Again, as I said, it has to be looked at. So is your CMDB updated? What are you scanning? What are you scanning over here, right? I mean, is it picking up the latest targets of your assets from that? Maybe most of the times. So that will reduce the false positives of what you get. Certain other lookup rules will also help in vulnerability group rules. Who should that vulnerability do? Most of the time is also spent on wrong assignment of the tickets or remediation that is sent off, and then they keep rotating around. All this will help significantly reduce that 90-day cycle to under 30 days, right, in remediate. So 2-3 important points, I'll repeat them again. Bring in the external contextualization, have your items discovered or assets discovered periodically, and feed that into the vulnerability management program. Look at the automated triage and certain other vulnerability group rules to who should that vulnerability be raised to. So the ideal operating model, all this makes is as when you enter in a program, review and update the policy and the processes for vulnerability management, implement the various security frameworks that are there required, PCI, ISO, what are you following? Define very clear roles and responsibilities of who is going to do what, when are they going to do it, how soon are they going to do it, what are their dependencies, and what are their outputs. R&R is not only pointing fingers at somebody else, so that's not my job, that's his job. The second part is automate everything that is repeatable. VAs, even pen tests can be automated. SAST, application code scans, bring them into CI/CD cycle. Look at those reports in a form where it is in a common dashboard, which helps you drive out the exceptions. So let's say an application is going through some testing, and and it's not falling under the storm. So those approvals can be taken, exceptions can be taken in advance, and it will help save time. Ongoing remediation. Remediation is an ongoing exercise. When you're setting up your policies and process, it's not a one-time exercise. It's not a as and when required or as and when time is available. It's an ongoing exercise. It's based on the risks of the vulnerabilities. So how do you do that? How do you do patch management? And patch management is different than vulnerability management. First, a lot of organizations don't even understand, right? Patch management is very, very different than vulnerability management. Vulnerabilities could be a port is open, but a patch is for a known vulnerability in an application or a OS or a database or any network device or anything else, which the OEMs use, right? So how do you handle the change management of that is also need to be brought into the ongoing remediation. Post the remediation, again, we have to do the operation success, which is the post remediation scans. Review, validate the scans, the effort, even the effort, what it has gone through that, review the SLAs, revise them, any evaluation of learnings, must go back and update the policies again. Once you do that over a, let's say a 12-month cycle, by at least 10 to 12 times, then only you will have an effective operating model to begin with, not to end with, to begin with. And it will further require ongoing tweaks as per the threats that are happening in the organization. So that's your ideal operating model. And it seems to work for most organizations, seems to work for me and my organization. I'm sure this will be helpful for you, and we can talk more on this later. So the operating process, that was the model. Now let's look at the process for vulnerability assessment. The process is look at the known standards, best practices, evaluate the various tools that are available for doing the assessments, gather the information as the prerequisites, right? Perform the scans. Scans should cover various areas. Scans should not be only IP-based. They should be port, protocols, OS, patch levels, everything. Analyze the availability of the operations and resistance towards those, and then create a report and close out based on how you're going to prioritize those remediation efforts, prepare the final report, and prepare a final report for remediation recommendations. And then you also have to go back and prepare a report to see what has been remediated. That will make the end-to-end accountability. I'm leaving some websites of interest over here. The MITRE site, which shows the common vulnerability exposures. You can go there and look at any vulnerabilities, known vulnerability exposure. The common vulnerability database or the NVD database that is there, it is there for looking at what is the threat factor, where did it happen first, how did it attack, and so on and so forth. If you want to know about any one of them, find all exploits for a vulnerability and the CVE histories, right? The CVE details. These are the four. If you are a role player in this area of security, then these four sites would be our Bible for organization success. The operating process for ongoing remediation is, again, very quickly, let's have a look at that. Analyze and validate these scans, prioritize and prepare a roadmap for fixing of those, implement the remediation, which is execute remediation plan, track closures within the SLAs. And these SLAs are not the ones which are the IT SLAs. These are the SLAs which are based on the risk of or risk capacity of an organization, that how soon should we do priority 1, priority 2, priority 3, or priority 4 kind of a fix. And then, of course, update the roadmap and rescan post that to make sure that it completes the 360-degree, and that is an ongoing remediation process. So not just the vulnerability scanning guys, but the remediation guys also feed in back into the system, and that should make the full 360-degree to make the system more effective. So why during remediation, if there were any problems, if there were any observations, did they have to revert back those changes? Why did they have to do that? Contextualize it to your business. If a particular application requires certain other sensitivities or a process changes or an set of infrastructure which is more critical to the organization, how do you handle that? All those things feed back into your governance framework so that this becomes an effective process. So in the maturity model, or how mature are you, what's your NIST score, right? If you were to say vulnerability management is an important area which gives you a lot of score if you were to look at your NIST rating of your organization, maturity rating of your organization. So there are 6 levels on this, and let's understand each one of those. So level 0 is like where the organizations do not have any vulnerability scanning, or maybe they do a manual vulnerability assessment. Sometimes some happens with patching, which is there's no real IT process or no matrix. Level 1, and I've seen a lot of organizations thinking all those 90-day ones would fall under level 1. So vulnerability management solution is in place. We use ad hoc scanning because we have to comply with ISO 27001, and the audit is going to be done only once in a year. So let's do a scan before that. These are those organizations. Excuse me. Level 2 and 3 are the what we call as the awareness and early maturity kind of organizations. They are the ones which are driven by regulatory frameworks, typically verticals which are financially related or European or US related, geography wise. Again, these are kind of enforced on them. And these organizations have some sort of a life cycle where, so the difference between 2 and 3 is that they have assessment and compliance framework, and they also analyze and prioritize. So these are the ones who do it periodically, do the vulnerability scanning, patching, remediation periodically. And these are the ones who have gone one step beyond and said that, what is the risk focus? Can I scan the data, prioritize that, analyze that, right? And so those are those ones. And then there are the mature organizations who have further contextualized it to the business risk context. They are level 4 and 5. I am yet to come across an organization who are at level 5. They are somewhere below level 5. There's nothing at level 5. But most of the organizations are at high level 4 maturity, level 4.8 or things like those. And that's where the attack management and business risk contextualization is happening. They have brought in outside-in view. They are looking at what is happening in the world. They are doing vulnerability intelligence. They are doing unified business and IT processes. So these vulnerability management is not lying in isolation as a process, and it's a part of the overall cycle in the ISACA. Again, let's pause here for a quick poll on whose responsibility is this. Right? Let's figure out whose responsibility is this.
Sure. So I have just released the poll. Who has the overall accountability for organizational risk due to vulnerability?
Read the question properly. Yeah, read the question very properly.
So we have options like management, be it CISO or CIO, security governance head, IT team, which is a remediation team, security testing team, board of the organization, or you don't know the answer. Please take 30 seconds in answering the poll, and then we'll display the results. Okay, here you go. Let me know when you're able to see the results.
Oh, great. So there is a large number of people who think that the CISOs or the CIOs are the accountable. The key word here was accountable, not responsible, right? So everybody here is responsible, but the overall accountability lies with the board, and which is why it makes it very, very important and interesting to see that what's my role in it, because each one of those teams that you see here is responsible, but the overall accountability lies with the board of the organization. So what are the guidelines for the business to look at this? We all know the OSI model, the physical data link, network, transport, session, presentation, and application layers, which in effect we try to protect through various technologies that have been implemented within the organization. So where does vulnerability management fit in this? Are we looking at the application layer vulnerabilities, transport layer, internet layer, network access layer, right? Why? Because the exploits that are there are various kinds of exploit in each of these areas that are happening. Let's look at some of them. For example, the DOS attack would be designed to disable or shut down the disruptor network on a website. So the vulnerabilities that you have to look for in the transport layer are related to these kind of attacks. Spoofing, right? This is related to network side of it. So, or data link side of it. Disguising a communication from an unknown source as being from a known trusted source, right? So do we have enough technologies in those places? Are they working effectively? Are there phishing attacks that are happening? We may be doing phishing simulations, but as our organization invested in phishing defense. A lot of phishing attacks are happening in the current times when COVID is running. People are working from home, and it's very easy to bypass those. Are they feeding in these important things? So from a vulnerability, if you have a vulnerability intelligence system, it will also tell you what are the IDs that are leaked or any credentials that are leaked. And that's the outside in view that will bring you a level 4 or 4+ kind of a maturity, right, towards some of these attacks. So a point to leave around here is that primarily some of the key for each of those layers. Keep your software up to date. Beware of suspicious email sites. Use two-factor authentication, secure network architecture, use HTTPS over HTTP, implement SPF, AKIM for spoofing, use VPN over public Wi-Fi, and so on and so forth. We know all this, right? So where does vulnerability management come? These are the vulnerabilities that we notice in each of those layers. If we do not go back and report to them, if there is no, these are long-term remediations possibly, but these are not immediately patching. And this was important for you to showcase, for me to showcase to you, because these are the inputs as a vulnerability management program lead. You would need to also own. You are a contributor to those. This will require long-term design changes within the organization, long-term architecture changes within the organization, investments which can be brought in for securing the missing gaps, which are there. So primarily, the message is that we can't prevent cyber attacks. We can't say that I'm 100% secure out of those, but we can definitely make them difficult if we have an end-to-end ownership. We create ourselves with an end-to-end ownership for the vulnerability management program. And that is the key to reducing the risk of an organization. I just have one more slide. Let's take some tips or summary out of the whole session that we learned today or looked at today. There's a 6-point picture that is here, which says that always inventory the assets. If you remember, we talked about looking at discovering newer assets that are coming in or the ones that are being closed down. Even the third parties, vendors, what are their roles, responsibilities? what kind of risk stature do those organizations have? Because you may be securing everything within your organization, but then you are missing out on those vendors who are, or the third parties, or these service providers that are, touching your IT systems, and they themselves are not secure. So is your vulnerability management program covering them as well? Map different dependencies, processes, and systems. What works with what, right? Define governance frameworks, risks, plans, assessments. Are you tied with certain frameworks? You have to do PCI compliance. Are you GDPR compliant? What kind of vulnerabilities are you looking at? You have to, and plan your assessments according to that. Set up a continuous monitoring process. Automate some of the tests so that you reduce on the effort and put the effort where it is needed the most, which is analysis and remediation. Right? Have real-time dashboards, because showing something which was a last week's report or even a last month's report is no longer the ask. The board today, as we learned, is accountable. Board is going to ask you, any C-level executives here, board will ask you, what is that 1% that you have not remediated? They're not worried about the 99% that you have remediated or found as vulnerabilities. Remember that last joke that I showed, 3 needles found in the haystack, right? So they're not worried about the 3 needles that they found in the haystack, because they believe, and that's your role, that you'll remediate against them. But what have you not found? What are you doing to find those proactively? Those are the ones that matter the most. And mature the process on an ongoing basis, because not one shirt fits all. Not one product will fit all. We have to constantly do labs, sessions, tests, and proactively monitor and analyze our results. The results from the previous cycle will change to this cycle, or this cycle will change from the previous cycle, and we have to do a constant analysis of those. So a threat intelligence analyst should be a part of a vulnerability management program, because people typically rely on the VA and PT experts who are very good at doing these scans, but not analyzing the results of those scans, not contextualizing to the business analysts need to be part of this team, right? And most importantly, your C-level executives, CIOs and IAs, CISOs need to be part of this team, because this program has to be top-down, driven top-down rather than bottom. That's all I had today. I hope you enjoyed the session. We can take some questions if there are any.
Absolutely. Thank you.